Morning. The Committee on Parole is called to order. Today is Tuesday, April the 11th, 8:38 a.m. My name is Brennan Kelsey. I'll be your chair along with Ms. Bonnie Jackson, Mr. Tony Marabella, staff and support of the DOC headquarters in Baton Rouge. Our remote location is DCI with staff and support of DCI. Please introduce yourself.
Assistant Warden Emily Smith.
Donald Cavalier, clarification.
Deputy Jail Administrative Coordinator Ashley Bradley, Records.
Alvin King, Richard.
That's it.
All right, we're ready for our first case. Please introduce yourself, state your name and DOC number.
My name is Preston G Demouchet Jr.
All right, Preston, you heard the introductions. We'll have some folks will speak at the appropriate time. We have Mr. Wilford Johnson, Brenda Johnson, Nicholas Schaff, Stacy Schaff, Gene Schaff, Winston White, who all make their time. We also have Ms. Cayenne Reese Dixon, who will make a statement at the appropriate time. Preston Demouchet, DOC number 90331. You're a third class offender. Parole eligibility date 9/21/1996. Good time date 6/23/2076. Full term date T6/21/72. 98-year sentence. Robbery. Does that sound correct?
Yes, sir.
Would you answer Mr. Marabella, please?
Good morning, Mr. Demouchet. My name is Tony Marabella. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Sir, how old are you?
I'm 72, sir, going on 73.
Okay, and how long have you been in prison on these charges?
47 years.
Tell me a little bit about your education. How far did you go in school?
Well, I went to as far as the 11th grade, sir, and then I've taken several correspondence courses in Angola. I took courses with Ms. Joyce Myers, with Salvation Army, because I was in the cells for they had me in the cell for after I came off the big stripe. Before that, I was working in the fields and I was all day. So they let me back out the lockdown and put me in the cell blocks, and I ran all the cell blocks. I do carpenter work. I do.
Did you ever get your GED?
Oh yes, sir. I have a GED. I got the GED from a place called is in California. I took a biblical course well, the GED was included, and I took a SCA right turn sanctuary. Sir, second academy, I graduated there, and my Miss Britton J. Ford was my caseworker.
Tell me a little bit about your work on the outside before you came to prison. How old were you when you came to prison on these charges? 24, 25, is that about right?
I was 24, sir.
Okay, so tell me who you were at 24 years old. Were you working?
Well, at one time I worked. I drove tractors, drove trucks. The electrician helpers work. I'm a chemist also. I work for Erickson
Chemist?
Yes, sir.
And you had that training before you came to prison?
Yes, sir. I worked for Erickson Chemical in Abbeville, Louisiana. I worked on a rig.
About drugs or alcohol. Did you ever use drugs or alcohol?
I've used drugs before. Yes, sir.
All right. Did you start using drugs?
Oh, years ago when I was young, I smoked
How old were you?
about 10, 11, because I grew up in a neighborhood with it.
Mr. Demouchet,
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to get some history on you, okay?
Yes.
I want to know right now about your drug use.
Okay.
Were drugs in any way involved in these two horrible murder armed robberies that you committed?
Well, I was drunk. I was full of
All
alcohol.
right. Let's talk about your substance abuse. I want to know when you started using drugs, when you started drinking. Okay, how old were you when you first started drinking?
10 years old.
And what did you start drinking?
Brandy, Seagram 7,
Okay,
Jack Daniels,
and when did you start smoking, as you said? I assume you're talking about marijuana.
cigarettes.
Okay,
I did marijuana before.
okay. Did you move to cocaine, heroin, anything besides marijuana?
No, sir.
Never tried any of those?
No, sir.
So prior to committing these armed robberies, I had a couple of charges that I want to talk about. One was a murder charge. What was that about? You had a murder charge back in, it looks like, 1972. The charges were dismissed, but what was that about? Tell me about that. What was that?
1972, I had a guy came into my house. I was staying downtown in New Iberia, Louisiana. He kicked the door and he came in with a bolt action shotgun, and we started struggling. And he started beating me with the shotgun. So the shells all fell out from the bottom of the shotgun. And afterwards, I shot him, but he didn't die. The murder that they charged me with was in 74, sir. It was in Olivia, Louisiana.
Well, let me slow you down. You did have a murder charge, a manslaughter charge in 74, but you had a murder charge in 72 that was ultimately dismissed the next year. That's what I'm asking you about. So someone busted into your house, and that's what that murder charge that was dismissed was about?
Well, he didn't die, as far as I know. William Doucette, he was shot.
I'm looking at your rap sheet, and it says you were charged with murder and it was dismissed. That was in 72. Now let's talk about the 74 manslaughter charge that you pled guilty to negligent homicide.
Right.
Tell me about that.
Well, my sister came, Kat, she was alive at the time, her and Gabriel Fontenot, my brother-in-law, they came from Houston. And they asked me to go out with them to a club. So I went out to a club with them. And I had a 5-shot 38. Okay.
He had a gun with you.
Yes, sir.
What were you doing with the gun?
Well, it was given to me from one of my uncles. He's dead.
I understand. Why did you have a gun going out?
Well, for protection, because a lot of guys in my neighborhood had guns at that time. And we went out.
Tell me what happened.
We went out, and a guy named Larry Brooks tried to hit my sister with a beer bottle. So I drew the pistol, and he drew a pistol, and he shot. I had a 5-shot 38, and he killed Miss Lillian Joseph, a friend of the family. That was a very good friend of my mother and I, by accident trying to shoot me, and he gave me the charge.
So you ended up pleading guilty to negligent homicide, is that
Yes,
right?
sir. Yes, sir.
Originally arrested for manslaughter, you pled guilty to negligent homicide.
Yes, sir, I did.
Was alcohol or drugs involved at that time?
Alcohol.
Now, how often were you drinking? You consider yourself to be an alcoholic?
At that time, I wasn't an alcoholic, but I used to drink.
Well, tell me about your drinking. How often were you drinking?
I used to drink a lot.
Well, every day?
Yes, sir.
And how much would you drink every day?
Like a half a G of wine. I might drink a little brandy or whiskey or Secret 7 or Jack Daniels and beer.
Well, let's talk about 1976, specifically May 10th of 1976. Let's talk about these 2 armed robberies that you committed that ultimately ended in 2 murders as well. So tell me what was going on in your life that you committed these armed robberies.
Well, one armed robbery with the bank. We were in the bank.
Tell me what was going on in your life prior to the armed robbery. What caused you to commit armed robberies? Were you drinking? You said you were drunk. Now you were drunk for both of them?
Well, sir, at that time, I was unemployed and I was drinking.
And you were drinking every day?
Every day, sir. Yes, sir.
So tell me what happened in these 2 armed robberies.
I went along with a guy who asked me to go to the place. He said it had been an easy job. And we went in the place of Gerald Paul Francis. And we went in the bank. And after we went in the bank, when I was coming out, I heard a shot.
Now, that's the second armed robbery. Tell me about the first one.
That was the first
You had
one.
already committed an armed robbery where a murder had occurred prior to that.
That was in Rain, Louisiana.
Right. So tell me about that one first, then we go to the bank.
He asked me to drive him to the store. He said he knew where he could get some money. So I drove him to the store. And I stood in the car. I never got out the car. And
You knew he
went,
murdered somebody though,
yes,
didn't you?
I know, sir.
And so you went with him again. The man who murdered somebody in an armed robbery.
Yes, sir, I did.
Tell me why you did that.
Because I was paranoid that he would say something about me and implicate me in a robbery. That was the reason.
So it was his fault you did that. You were afraid of him. And what you telling me?
To an extent, I was afraid that he would implicate me in the robberies at that time.
Were you drinking then?
Yes, sir. I was drinking every day.
Have you ever had any treatment for your alcoholism outside of prison?
No, sir.
Have you had any treatment for your alcoholism inside of prison?
Well, I'm dried out after all these years.
I understand you're dried out now. Have you had any specific treatment for alcoholism?
No, sir.
None at all.
No, sir.
What programs have you taken?
I've taken several programs, basically a lot of church programs, behavior modification programs, of that sort, programs of that sort.
But no alcohol treatment? Have you taken any sort of victim awareness or victim impact, anything like that?
Well, that was with the Second Chance Academy, the behavior modification programs. They gave, they say something about and taught about victim awareness and substance abuse, et cetera, 100 hours, anger management, things of that nature.
Mr. Demouchet, you have lost 275 days of good time. Why?
Well, Angola, when I was in Angola, I'd be at work. And I used to run the line. I used to be number one in the farm line, cutting grass and everything else with disc bank blades and what have you. And a lot of guys would leave a lot of cuts undone, and the field farmer would write me up for it at times, or I had several different write-ups that I didn't know nothing about, like secret indictments. But I would work. I had good work ethics.
You had a total of 261 write-ups, and those were all somebody else's fault? You took
No.
their rap?
No, sir. The reason I had write-ups because when I was called on to testify, and I was placed on a big stripe in Angola. Now I had to fight. You know, I got written up.
Write-up you had in May of last year for disobedience.
May of last year for disobedience.
May the 12th of 2022, you got a write-up for disobedience.
At low court.
Low court write-up. I was working in the kitchen over here, sir, frying foods from 11 o'clock at night. And I had a guy, Vaughn was supposed to pick up my boxes and everything. I'm on unit 2. And you're supposed to pick up everything off the floor, like I do every morning over there. I'm a dorm holder. And I didn't know he didn't pick up a law book off my bed. And so I got written up for low court.
Somebody else's fault again.
Well, I was at work. I go to work at 11 o'clock at night. I'm in the kitchen frying eggs.
Mr. Demouchet, let me ask you something. You've been in prison for 46 years.
Yes, sir.
Have you given any thought to the harm and the pain that you caused with your crimes?
Yes, sir, I'm remorseful, sir. I'm sorry about that. I really
Here
am.
to say that, but tell me how, tell me what you've thought about all these years, about what you've done and what pain you've caused.
I didn't like it. And I've asked God for forgiveness over and over again. I've asked God for forgiveness over and over. I'm remorseful about that, sir. And anything I could do to remedy that situation, I know I can't bring the life back because I'm not God, but I'll do it.
Mr. Demouchet, there's, I will state a few things for the record, that you've got nothing you can do about this. You have a vehement opposition from law enforcement. You have vehement opposition from the victim's family in this case. Your institutional report suggests that overall your record's poor. Warden, what can you tell us about Mr. Demouchet?
Well, I was given,
Gordon's gonna speak now.
For me to speak,
ma'am,
for me to speak.
I didn't understand.
He asked for me to speak.
Oh, okay, excuse me.
So, Preston's only been at DCI since May of last year. He transferred here from Angola. He's only had that one low court write-up since he's been here. He hadn't been in much trouble. He did work in the kitchen for a while. He has been a dorm orderly since December of 2022. We show that he completed Thinking for a Change. We don't have record of him receiving a GED or a high set.
I didn't see that as well, okay.
It tells me that education probably wasn't able to verify.
He did take Thinking for a Change there or somewhere else?
It looks like he took it in Angola.
Okay. What programs do y'all have there? Has he enrolled in any of them now?
He is, currently, he's not enrolled in any programs.
Thank you very much, Warden. That's all.
All right, we'll hear from Mr. Dixon now. Would you like to make a statement? Ms. Dixon, you ready? Okay, I'm sorry. Yes, you go ahead. Make a brief statement. Come on.
Okay, Nixon, Preston G. I found out, Preston was my father, 42 years old. I did a DNA test, and it was, my mother, telling me that, he was medic, because I was conceived by, he was locked up in a gated parish. And, the jailer there, they didn't have, I guess, a name or whatever, you know, they do whatever. And, I think she got his burning from. And that's how I found that he was my father. And since I found that he's been my father, I've been there, you know, trying to help him with everything he's been. I know a lot about, you know, about a lot of things. I just a lot of, you know, and I feel sorry for the family as well. So I can understand, you know, how everybody feels. But I just can't just.
All right, thank you. Thank you for being here. And we'll hear from Mr. Wilbur Johnson.
My name is Wilford Johnson. I'm here to represent my grandfather Curtis Johnson, who was robbed and murdered by Preston G Demouchet or Francis on May 10th, 1976. At the trial, they said they kept the town Rain, Louisiana, to the Rain State Bank. At the time, it was raining so hard and had too many people. So they changed their mount and headed out of town. They spotted the Hank's hardware store and decided to stop there and rob it. They went in and took it out of the register and then made my get on his hand, knee, and then they walked out. They were eating. Then once they were in the car, we found out at the trial. They said, "We forgot something." And they went back, shot my grandfather. And they ended up getting the $30. And my grandfather never resisted the fight. He was 75 years old. And the people that knew him He liked everyone in town, everyone liked him. He didn't have an opinion, man. And at the time, he didn't have to be working, but he liked being around people, loved life. And, after they killed him 2 weeks later, Gary went to the St. Martin Bank, Parkview, robbed and shot Beverly Street. Who was a bank that all part of the county at the time. At the time, they were both sentenced. All was that you got more on robbery at the time than murder. Well, that was the charge with robbery. And at the time, which they gave him 2,009 years, patient no, and he went in blew up the shame. And they were put here because having to come here and relive my father's death again. Just wants a second chance. But my grandfather didn't have a second chance. And all the ones they did keep themselves, they have a second chance. After the problem. Preston was convicted of manslaughter in 1974, sentenced to 3 years. He was released early. They put on the streets, and now he wants to be released again. But if we have made him serve his time, my grandfather and one in the bank might, they might not have been murdered. So, I'm asking the full board to consider this and don't let him and anyone else victim.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your comment. Gene Shaw.
Somebody else is responsible. Still no ownership. Over the years, I've received several correspondence from the state regarding Preston. Rolled out to the state, May 11th, 2108. He's not eligible for diminution of sentence, and his full term date is 2172. And yet, I'm here again for Preston G. Preston was convicted. It took the jury a grand total of 22 minutes to return a unanimous guilty verdict. That kind of speaks volumes to the strength of the case. Preston, his statement about he was outside the bank when he heard the shot. That is a lie. Here's a photo of Preston leaving the bank, a bag of money, and a gun in it. Here's a photo of Preston at the bank counter with a gun in his hand. Still, he blamed Jerry Francis for everything that went on. My records show he has not received his GED. Your records show he has not received his GED. Preston says he's received his GED. Again, conflicting stories from Preston. My mother had been working at the bank about 8 years. When they robbed the bank, they had gone in early in the morning, back when the bank had opened, there were people in the lobby. So they left. They drove around parks, people in parks home, driving around all morning. And they went back in the bank. All the customers left at the end of the bank with full intent of killing whoever in the bank. That was the plan from the get-go, and this was early, in the morning, about 10 o'clock in the morning, so I don't think the man was drunk at the time. But that was the plan. It was going to kill whoever was in the family. Getting my mother down on the floor, just like he did, Mr. Johnson. He shot my mother in the back of the head. And it ruined the center part of her brain. So she didn't die right away. She was deaf. She was blind. She was mute, completely paralyzed, and was in a comatose state for 16 months. But prefrontal lobe was still intact. So you hear about, juveniles, I like to hear them defend juveniles that the prefrontal lobe developed. Hers was fully developed. My mother could still think. She still had brain activity. 16 months. She lived in here. They used the big unit that came from the bank. They bought a Plymouth Duster. They had already arranged that. They drove to Houston. Plan was to go on to Mexico, but when you rob a bank, the FBI gets involved. So they caught him 2 days later. Had they not robbed the bank, no telling how many other places they would rob, how many other people they would kill. Know his record, had a juvenile record, the attempted murder, the manslaughter, which he got out early, and then went on this hand free. So he was criminal by the time 1976 came along. Gary's statement when they were arrested, he said that Preston also backed him by committing another armed robbery and generating with a man named Sean. Okay. You heard Mr. Johnson speak about the murder of his grandfather. On July 1st, 1976, while in police custody, Preston's accomplice, Barry Francis, confessed that he and Preston had also committed the March 30th, 1976 robbery of the Hasty Market in Marbury, Louisiana, where they killed a 62-year-old Gladu. On September 17th of the year, Malcolm Roy also testified under oath that he and Jerry robbed Hasty Market and killed Gladu. Malcolm Roy confessed that robbed getaway car. Barry Francis took the police to the area where they had discarded the weapon. And the same weapon ballistics proved was used to kill Louis Gladu, my mother, and Mr. Johnson. This went on for years. 60 Minutes actually did a story on this. And these men were finally released because 2 other men had been charged and convicted, were finally released after serving 25 years for these murders that Preston and Jerry had committed, but then went to trial for. There's a whole textbook chapter now used at UOL that covers the injustice of the whole Louis Gladu situation. Okay. In both trials, the prosecuting district attorneys at the time went with the armed robbery charge because it had the partial sentence. That sentence wasn't reinstated until July 7th, just 5 weeks later. Had these crimes been committed 5 weeks later, they would go on for the death sentence, and Preston would probably have gotten the death penalty and put to death a long time ago. I understand the initiative to lower prison costs, reducing prison populations, and extending leniency to inmates and victims of crime and extenuating circumstances. Preston did not merit any of such consideration. Crimes were not lone murders. They were committed. They were not committed in the heat of passion. A drug deal that went bad, a fight that got out of control, or a kid that got into an unforeseen situation. And Preston Demouchet is accountable for the lives of 4 victims in the attempted murder of the 5th. Premeditated murders were committed by an evil man with a length of criminal record, who has demonstrated over and over again, and I think the prison record shows this too. And he holds no regard for the lives of his fellow human beings. All we ask is that stay respectfully, keep the promises that it made to our families. So,
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your comment. Mr. White, would you like to wrap it up? Like to make a brief statement, right?
I was also told that if he's released, he's requested to go back to Nigeria. That is just not acceptable.
Thank you.
And are coming to Rand either.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I see so.
This is gonna be difficult for me. I appreciate the attention. And was given.
Speak up a
I
little bit.
appreciate the attention that the panel was given to the victims here this morning. Also, consented. I will be brief. Concerned, particularly if he is released. Stipulations are in means that this obviously not least if he is concerned with the dislocation. That's just going to be respected. I'll echo the board's concern about the disciplinary report. I find it is a disciplinary for this individual to manage to. That's important because when you have the track record that you do, your time in prison should be spent doing things other infractions. However, there's a record of infractions in beyond 261. My records also show that it's not proper. The opposition from law enforcement is not we should express strong opposition to his release and recognize some of the members here for some of you in the CJC. I know that you have operated one more than many more, and you've seen it change in other parts of the CJC. And that may be good, that may, we're not here to argue that. But the board exists. The board exists so that a human exercise discretion in how those. And as lawyers and ex post facto, that idea makes sense. The notion that a king can't create a law after you've already done it, just for the purpose of the scenario. Well, I would suggest that the discretion of the court here today should be that the opposite is true, the inverse is true. That the state should not make a law, or at least if they make the law, should not apply it on these facts to victims when they went through a trial decades ago. And you've heard, I don't know if you have any materials about the problems of the first degree and second degree was 40. So the purpose of the middle of the state of Louisiana that reached beyond a reasonable doubt, careful consideration, was that this man should not receive the law. Change. But I'm asking the board exercise discretion to uphold that original will. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. All right, Preston, would you like to make a statement on your behalf?
Yes, sir. I didn't shoot. I didn't
Speak
shoot
to
any.
the panel.
Yes, sir. I didn't shoot anybody, sir. I didn't kill nobody. And well, I understand that the victims' families are remorseful. I was granted double good time, and I opted in lieu of my incentive pay wages in 2005. I have paperwork right here showing where, because of my good conduct, even though they kept me in the cell for 26 years, my accomplice is in Jackson Barracks. I'm older now. I'm remorseful that these people were injured and in the way they were, and that they, it resulted in their deaths. I didn't do it. I participated in the robberies. The robbery and rain, I didn't get out of the car. The bank, I was coming out of the bank with money. I got caught on the camera. My accomplice, everybody know, even at the trial, it was brought out that he did the shooting. Okay, all right. So they had a lot of other cases they tried to implicate me in. Prior to this, these two robberies, I had a simple burglary and a theft. They sent me to Angola, where I had big stripe. I was on a big stripe, and I had to fight. and I fought, and I made everybody proud of who I was. And I had to be violent. They made me violent. They threw me in a red hat, and they treated me like I was a savage. And I had to fight. I had to fight to eat a piece of bread and water. And I wasn't like that, because I wasn't going to be no homosexual. Okay? And it's just something about it that it overplayed. When I got out, I kept drinking, and I participated in these robberies. And I'm sorry about that. And I'm sorry that these people were injured and murdered, but I didn't do it. I was there. I participated. And so I filed. I did, I was a proficient filer when I was in Angola. I filed, and I was awarded double good time in lieu of my incentive pay wages. I have paperwork where I tried to revoke my selection because the Department of Corrections still had my time being calculated under Act 739, not 138, the laws that I, opted for in lieu of my incentive pay wages. So then the First Circuit Court of Appeals and the 19th Judicial District Court said that I could not revoke my selection. And the Commissioner Mr. John M. Smart, said that I was released as if on parole, but I was never released. So like I said, the record will reflect my accomplice in Jackson Barracks. He's in Jackson Barracks. I didn't pull no trigger whatsoever in either one of the robberies. The robbery in Rain, Louisiana, I never got out of the car. That was my testimony at the trial. Okay? The robbery in Parks, I went into the bank, and you saw me coming out of the bank. The surveillance camera did capture that. That's factual allegation. I didn't pull no trigger there neither.
Yes, sir. Let's go and wrap it up, repeating what you already told us. Go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay, so like I said, I'm remorseful, sir. I feel bad about that. I was younger then. I was in a defunct state of mind. I'm older now, and I could be I'm more responsible, and I work. I have good work ethics. I'm sorry that these poor people was murdered.
Thank you for your comment.
Thank you.
Fair to vote, Mr. Marabella.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Demouchet, we've heard a lot about the law changing, and it has. This board has a responsibility. It's different from the judge, it's from the prosecutor, and it's we abide by whatever the law is. So just as you talk about the law, the law has changed. So you're here today having a parole hearing, and that's what the law affords you. I want to tell you that when I read your report and I looked at all of the stuff, I was very concerned. But I said, here's a 71-year-old been in prison for 46 years. I'm going to listen to him. I'm going to listen to what he's got to say. He hadn't done very many programs. He's got a horrible history in prison of write-ups. But I'm going to listen to him, and I'm going to see what he says. And I'm hoping he comes and truly accepts responsibility for what he did and shows remorse. Mr. Demouchet, you did just the opposite. You blamed everybody else but you. You were a principal to those murders. Maybe you didn't pull the trigger. There was a murder the first time you knew about it. You went back again with the same man for another armed robbery. And if he committed the murder, and you say, oh, me, I just with him. That's BS. You haven't accepted responsibility for what you did. Pain and the sorrow that you have caused to this family, you have no idea what that is. And I'm very disappointed in the fact that you haven't taken programs that can help you learn. So Thinking for a Change, that's one of our better programs. Of course, it was a long time ago. But you haven't learned anything about what you've done to the victims? Yeah, here lately, you've got a good record. Although the record on paper isn't that good as well. Your institution report, bottom line is, I was hoping to see much changed person in what I read about in the paper, on the papers. And I haven't seen that. I think you've got more work to do. You're right. You're older. I would have hoped, would have accepted responsibility for what you did and move forward. But you haven't. You're still blaming everything else. My vote today, based upon your disciplinary history of violence, criminal history, lack of programs that you take, the opposition that we have from both law enforcement as well as victims. I vote today.
Ms. Jackson?
Commissioner, my vote is the same, for the same reason. You've done absolutely nothing in any way to attempt to make amends for the harm you've caused. You've done nothing really to improve yourself as a human being. You have a history of violence. You have a poor disciplinary record while in prison, and your overall institutional record is poor. My vote today is to deny.
All right, you have 2 votes to deny your parole. Also, I'm going to vote to deny your parole for the same reasons as already stated here. 3 votes to deny. Today, your parole has been denied. Good luck.
Well, hello everyone. I think Miss Jackson made a Miss Jackson worthy. I'm out in the tent with my kids. A Miss Jackson worthy re-entrance there. It's been a long time since we've seen her back on the panel, so it's so great. I know I am excited to see her, and I think a lot of you may also be. Mr. Marabella really said so much of what I was going to say during this unpacking. I think you really hit it the nail on the head. There, hold on one second. It's there's something that he said there. He said they made me violent when he was referring to being in Angola and all of his fighting write-ups. And sir, I have to disagree with you. You were a violent man before you got into Angola. You had 2 people died that you were involved with before even getting to, well, not 2, 3. He has his first story where he talks about fighting over what he called a bolt action shotgun. I think he misspoke. I think he meant a pump action. I've never heard of a bolt action. If there are any experts out there, please do correct me. And he gives the story about fighting with that in his house, and then him shooting the other man. Whether he died or not, we're not so sure. He claims no. On the record, they say yes. Then he has the other incident, and really, it's just hard to really believe much of what he says. Does seem that there's a lot of contradicting things. He says he's out. He was carrying his 5-shot 38 in the bar, and then the other guy shot at him, missed, and killed his dear friend. Was it a family friend, or maybe even a relative? And he said he caught the charge for that, and they lowered it. And then he talks about the robberies. And the bottom line is that there's one thing if you're the getaway driver and it's a one-time thing and I happen to be on the side of the fence that getaway driver should not be held as accountable as the shooter. That's just how I feel about it. I think that I know that there are many different opinions, and we can always agree to disagree. But this is totally different. You know, as it said, he went on one robbery. His friend knew there was an incident, something happened. Someone was shot, and then he went on a second one. And once you go on the second one, you don't have that excuse anymore. In my opinion, then you are just as culpable, because you know what can happen. You know what to expect. You don't have the excuse anymore, which is, I had no intention of there being a violent act. Again, that's just my opinion. But this man, from all the records of it, was incredibly violent. You don't just have 3 people die in your lifetime, over lifetime, and he was the reason why he has a chance of parole after receiving something like a 200-year sentence. I mean, he's not supposed to be released until 2172, and that's because he was sentenced, my understanding is, under the age of 18. So the Supreme Court found it unconstitutional to give anyone life who's under the age of 18, and that's why he has a chance of parole. But you know, if there was anything that the board was looking for, they were looking for him to take culpability, to own up to what he had done, and to show remorse, and he really didn't show any of that. He seemed to me to have a complete really lack of remorse, and that's what the board said. And also, whose statement really struck out to me, and thankfully we were able to hear him. So often we're not. The man who really painted the picture of what happened, all the details, and his poor mother whose life was taken in the bank. And, you know, they had a whole plan to escape to Mexico. And like he said, because the FBI was involved, it took them 2 days to capture them. He mentioned that it took the jury just 22 minutes to give the guilty verdict. 22 minutes. I have never heard of anything like that. I'm sure it's happened many times before, but, you know, usually you hear about them at least taking lunch. So there's at least, like, you know, an hour of getting lunch before, but 22 minutes, you don't even have time to sit down. It's, you know, and I didn't read the court transcripts just because I'm out camping, and I didn't spend the time looking for it. I'm sure it's out there because he went to court. There probably are appeals. If you have it, drop it in the. You can email to me, and I'll drop it in the description, because I am curious to know what the appeals are. You know, I wonder if they allowed his prior history, which I doubt they would have. That would have been very odd. So the jury, in theory, would have been going on simply just 2 robberies, not the previous violence in his life, right? And it still only took him 22 minutes. You know, we have seen people in his situation. If you don't want to take into account the previous violence, and you want to take into account just these 2 robberies where he claims to not be the shooter, which I believe that he wasn't the shooter. I do believe that, but I don't believe in this case it buys him anything. But still, he could have gotten out if he had had a different attitude and had served his time more meaningfully. There were some surprising things in there where he said he was a chemist, but again, I don't know how much credibility he has with the whole GED thing, and now it could very well be that he got all his GED, but he does seem to be a little bit loose with his tongue, if you will, and I don't. I think that the board made a great call here. Really, they did. You know, Mr. Marabella said the pain and sorrow that you brought the family, you don't even understand it. And What Miss Jackson said was like nail in the coffin. Oh, also, what we have here is a new warden. We have not met her yet, so this is her first appearance. Our favorite warden, who's usually here, is not. But it's always great to welcome or to meet new wardens. But with that, I'll let you go. And I don't know. Let's see if my kids want to say hi. Mandu, Nomidu, you want to say hi to the group? Just they could finally meet you. Everyone wants to meet you guys.
Hi.
Here, come in the camera so you can say hello.
Hey.
I'll introduce you to. This is Mandu, the famous.
Sorry, no man, boo.
And this is Nomidu. Say hi.
Hi.
Well, now you met two of them. Okay, sweetie. And with that, I'll let you go.